can anyone ever forget that night at Cutthroat Swamp? Lucas and his 5 friends decided to go fishing during the peak of the heavy rainy season in the countryside. But that very night, while chasing a massive fish, Lucas crossed paths with something sinister. A night when on his solitary walk home, he was forced to join a demon's funeral, and the corpse was laid out on a casket carriage crafted by his own hands. Without further delay, let's dive right into the story. I will share the events exactly as they were documented. People from all walks of life, from holy priests to ordinary folks, have claimed to witness supernatural funerals at various times. They have faced terrifying, unexplainable anomalies. But even before encountering a demon's funeral, one might experience something far more bizarre and horrifying. Today, I am going to share a true story based on one such chilling experience. To protect the identity of the person who shared this with me, I will be using a pseudonym at his request. However, because some people in that region might still recognize him, I will also omit the exact names of the locations. It has been a while since I brought you a true supernatural encounter. Let's get straight to the core of the story. This story goes back to a time when old wooden casket carriages in city churches were being replaced by modern ones made of iron pipes and metal sheets. Slowly, these metal carriages were making their way from the cities into a few rural community chapels. Lucas worked at a metal workshop in Chicago, where he manufactured various metal furniture, embalming tables, and these very casket carriages. He had been in this profession for nearly 3 years. A guy named Ryan worked alongside him. Noticing this one day, Ryan asked him, "Hey, why do you always scratch that mark on the handles after finishing a carriage?" Lucas replied, "Well, I just do it because these carriages get shipped to different corners of the country. Whenever I visit..." How can anyone ever forget that night at Cutthroat Swamp? Lucas and his 5 friends decided to go fishing during the peak of the heavy rainy season in the countryside. But that very night, while chasing a massive fish, Lucas crossed paths with something sinister. A night when on his solitary walk home, he was forced to join a demon's funeral, and the corpse was laid out on a casket carriage crafted by his own hands. Without further delay, let's dive right into the story. I will share the events exactly as they were documented. People from all walks of life, from holy priests to ordinary folks, have claimed to witness supernatural funerals at various times. They have faced terrifying, unexplainable anomalies. But even before encountering a demon's funeral, one might experience something far more bizarre and horrifying. Today, I am going to share a true story based on one such chilling experience. To protect the identity of the person who shared this with me, I will be using a pseudonym at his request. However, because some people in that region might still recognize him, I will also omit the exact names of the locations. It has been a while since I brought you a true supernatural encounter. Let's get straight to the core of the story. This story goes back to a time when old wooden casket carriages in city churches were being replaced by modern ones made of iron pipes and metal sheets. Slowly, these metal carriages were making their way from the cities into a few rural community chapels. Lucas worked at a metal workshop in Chicago, where he manufactured various metal furniture, embalming tables, and these very casket carriages. He had been in this profession for nearly 3 years. A guy named Ryan worked alongside him. Noticing this one day, Ryan asked him, "Hey, why do you always scratch that mark on the handles after finishing a carriage?" Lucas replied, "Well, I just do it because these carriages get shipped to different corners of the country. Whenever I visit a church or a chapel anywhere, I check the carriages to see if they were made by me. Though, to be honest, I haven't stumbled upon one of my own yet." Ryan pondered for a moment and said, "True, but these casket carriages are always locked inside the church basements or sheds at night. No one can just take them without asking the caretaker. But when I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me stories about demonic entities holding midnight funerals. Where on earth do they get a proper casket carriage from?" Lucas laughed it off. "That's actually something to think about. I've heard plenty of folklore since I was a kid too, but have we ever seen it with our own eyes? It's probably just an old wives' tale." Lucas hadn't visited his hometown in about 6 months. Lately, he kept seeing his mother in his dreams every night, and he was feeling incredibly homesick. He decided to take a short leave from the workshop to visit his family in the countryside. He successfully secured a short leave from the workshop. To get to Lucas's hometown, one could either take a long-distance bus or a train. Lucas always preferred the train. Taking the train from Chicago to his country station meant traveling well past dusk. From the station, it required a 3-mile ride on a local open cart vehicle, followed by over a mile of walking on foot to reach his house. Like always, Lucas waited at the terminal for his train. However, due to a major scheduling breakdown, his train was delayed by a grueling 4 hours. By the time he finally boarded, it was already midday. Consequently, it was nearly 11 p.m. when he stepped off at his rural station. The station lights were flickering dimly in the dark. Stepping outside, he realized that because it was so late, there was only one old open cart vehicle waiting by the curb. Lucas walked up, saw a very old, frail man sitting in the driver's seat. The man looked as though he possessed no strength left in his body. In the dim, shifting shadows, his face remained completely unrecognizable. Lucas stated his destination and asked if the driver would take him there. The old driver looked up, stared at Lucas from head to toe, scanning him silently, and then gestured for him to get in. The cart rattled to life and began moving. A dim lantern hung beneath the cart, casting a faint, trembling glow on the dirt road, but it wasn't enough to see anything clearly. Lucas tried to make small talk with the driver, but the old man remained dead silent. Most of the time, he simply nodded or shook his head faintly to Lucas's questions. The cart moved deeper along the desolate country roads. Finally, reaching the drop-off point, Lucas paid the fare and began his walk. He still had a significant distance to cover on foot. The time was already past midnight, creeping closer to 11:30 p.m. He hadn't anticipated the severe train delay, so he hadn't brought a flashlight with him. Fortunately, the sky was clear, and the bright moonlight was the only comforting thing he had. He walked until he reached a fork in the road. From this point, there were 2 ways to reach his house. One was a longer, winding dirt path that hugged the bend of the river. The other was a shortcut cutting straight through the middle of an infamous marshland known as Cutthroat Swamp. Lucas actually didn't know why it was named Cutthroat Swamp, but the locals shared endless dark rumors about the place.
Lucas paused for a moment to calculate his options. Taking the river path would add at least another 15 to 20 minutes to his journey. After waiting hours at the station and traveling all day, his exhausted body simply couldn't take it anymore. He made up his mind to take the shortcut through Cutthroat Swamp. He stepped off the main road and down into the marsh, walking along a narrow raised dirt ridge between the fields. Under the clear sky, the moonlight illuminated everything quite well. A sharp, chilly breeze brushed against his skin. Before he knew it, he had walked a considerable distance. The main road behind him had completely vanished into the darkness. Suddenly, the distant cry of a wild coyote broke the silence. As soon as the first one howled, a dozen other coyotes joined in, unleashing a chorus of eerie, mournful cries. Lucas felt a sudden surge of fear. Getting cornered by a pack of coyotes in the middle of the night would be fatal. He hadn't thought about this when he left the main road. Otherwise, he would have at least carried a thick wooden stick into the swamp. As these terrifying thoughts raced through his mind, a bizarre noise caught his attention. He paused and looked around carefully, but he couldn't pinpoint the source. Yet the sound felt strangely familiar, though he couldn't immediately recall what it was. Soon, it felt like the sound was rapidly approaching him behind. He spun around and froze. A massive, pitch-black wild boar was grunting aggressively, heading straight toward him. The moment Lucas turned to face it, the beast abruptly stopped in its tracks. Then it veered to Lucas's left. Stepping off the ridge, the boar began digging furiously into the muddy earth with its nows, devouring something unknown as it kept moving forward. Lucas was more bewildered than terrified. To his knowledge, no one in or around his village bred wild boars, and there was absolutely no reason for one to be roaming here at this hour. He tried to rationalize it, thinking that perhaps a migratory pack of wild hogs had passed through the region, and this one had simply gotten separated from the herd. Trying to shake off the unease, Lucas continued walking toward his house. But he had no idea that his bewilderment was about to turn into absolute, paralyzing terror. A moment later, Lucas noticed another boar emerging from the shadows. Then another. They joined the first one, their eyes reflecting the moonlight, digging into the earth in the exact same rhythmic, unsettling manner, keeping perfect pace with him. He blinked, and the single boar multiplied into 3, then 6, then 9. Lucas felt his entire body go cold with dread. A freezing shiver ran straight down his spine, and he began to sweat profusely. The grunting of the boars grew louder and more aggressive, transforming into a deep guttural growl as they began closing in on him. Lucas was paralyzed, his throat completely dry. Should he bolt forward, or should he turn around and run back the way he came? His mind blanked. The pack of boars seemed to multiply endlessly, forming a dark, writhing wall closing in on him. No, he couldn't just stand there. Lucas summoned every ounce of strength left in his body and bolted forward into a dead sprint. Behind him, the terrifying sounds of the trampling hooves and heavy breathing chased him, growing faster and louder by the second. He ran blindly through the dark, completely losing his bearings. In his panic, he had no idea which part of the vast swamp he was heading into. After sprinting for what felt like an eternity, completely lost and terrified, a sudden calm voice broke through the darkness, greeting him with a formal evening salutation. Lucas gasped, spinning around. In a trembling, breathless voice, he returned the greeting. Standing before him was an elderly, tall man with a thick, snow-white beard, staring directly at him. Seeing another human being instantly relieved a fraction of Lucas's terror. He stepped closer to the old man. Oddly, the moment the man appeared, the massive wild boar pack vanished into thin air, as if they had never existed. The old man looked at him and asked, "What are you doing out here in the swamp so late in the night?" Still trembling, Lucas explained that he was simply trying to walk home. The old man nodded slowly and said, "Listen, since you have stumbled upon this path tonight, there is a small task you must do for me." Lucas was taken aback. Why was a complete stranger asking him to do a favor in the dead of night in the middle of a desolate swamp? Lucas cautiously asked, "What kind of task?" The old man replied, "A member of our clan passed away today. His body is laid out just a little further ahead. Some of elders from my clan are already gathered there. However, we are facing a problem with digging his grave." Lucas frowned, his suspicion rising. Why would a dead body be out here in the middle of a swamp at midnight? And I've lived here my whole life, but I've never seen you before. Where did your clan come from? Why would you have trouble digging a grave? And who buries their dead in the middle of a marsh? The old man's tone suddenly turned sharp and authoritative. "You ask far too many questions. You do not need to know the answers to everything. All you need to know is that you are coming with me right now, and you are going to dig this grave."
Lucas began to sweat through his clothes again. He realized he was trapped in a deeply unnatural situation. His instincts screamed at him to turn around and run. But run where? He was completely disoriented and had no clue where he was within the swamp. Sensing his hesitation, the old man turned and began walking. Left with no choice and gripped by fear, Lucas slowly followed behind him. Under the bright moonlight, Lucas soon spotted a gathering of dark, towering silhouettes in the distance. As they drew closer, Lucas saw a group of exceptionally tall, pale men standing in a tight circle. They were whispering among themselves in a strange, low dialect that Lucas couldn't comprehend. He had never seen any of these people in his life. Their foreign, unnatural presence was glaringly obvious. The moment Lucas stepped into the clearance, the whispering ceased instantly. Every single one of them turned their heads, their cold eyes locking onto him. A little further to the side, he could see the faint, shrouded outlines of what appeared to be women. As Lucas stood there frozen, a young child, appearing to be no older than 7 or 8, suddenly ran out from the crowd towards him. The boy approached Lucas and held out an antique, highly polished brass pitcher filled with water. In the moonlight, the metallic surface of the pitcher gleamed with an unnatural intensity. The old man beside Lucas commanded, "Take the pitcher, wash your hands, your face, and cleanse yourself for the ritual. This is your water." By now, Lucas felt as though he was trapped in a waking nightmare, moving entirely on autopilot. He took the heavy brass pitcher from the child's hands, walked a few paces away into the muddy field, and knelt. Trembling, he muttered a silent prayer and began the cleansing ritual. When he took the water into his mouth to rinse, he was startled. The water tasted incredibly, unnaturally sweet. Once Lucas finished the cleansing, the little boy stepped forward, snatched the brass pitcher back, and vanished into the dense crowd of tall shadows. The old man who had brought him there then handed Lucas a heavy iron crowbar and a shovel. He pointed his long finger towards a specific patch of earth and commanded, "Listen to me carefully. Right here, in the middle of this plot, is where you will dig the grave." Lucas stepped forward toward the designated spot. He first leveled the topsoil with the shovel. The old man stood right beside him, gesturing with his hands to show the exact dimensions, where to dig, and how far to extend the borders.
As Lucas followed the hand movements, a cold wave of dread washed over him. The measurements shown for the grave were unnaturally long, far exceeding any normal human being. Left with no choice, he used the crowbar to mark the edges. The old man remained stationed by his side, watching his every move. Digging the earth, Lucas caught the man staring at him with a hollow, unblinking gaze under the moonlight. The surrounding swamp looked enchantingly beautiful, yet completely eerie. In that forgotten corner of the world, under the pale moon, Lucas was digging a grave for someone he didn't even know. After digging for a while, Lucas wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked up at the old man. It's impossible to dig a grave this size all by myself. Back in my hometown, when someone passes away, a group of people work together. I can't finish this huge grave all alone while all of you just stand around watching and doing nothing to help. The old man replied coldly, "If the people standing here could help you, I would have made them dig it. I wouldn't have brought you here." Lucas realized that arguing was futile. For a brief second, he thought about dropping the tools and bolting into the dark, but the thought of escaping through a crowd of such unnaturally tall figures seemed impossible. And if he ran back into the pack of wild boars, he wouldn't survive the night. He kept digging. He lost track of time, his body giving out from the grueling labor. Drenched in sweat and battling his own mind, he somehow managed to finish a makeshift grave. As he climbed out, the old man gestured again. The young boy stepped forward, handing him another brass pitcher of water. Lucas washed his face and hands. The elders then spoke in unison. "The funeral service is about to begin. Join the rows with us." Lucas watched as the tall, pale shadows lined up in perfect, rigid rows. The elderly man stepped to the front to lead the sermon. Once the silent, eerie prayers concluded, the old man turned to Lucas and asked, "Don't you want to see whose grave you have been digging all night?" Lucas was already terrified of corpses, and the thought of looking at a dead body under these bizarre midnight circumstances made his stomach churn. Yet an invisible force seemed to compel him forward. He walked toward a metal casket carriage draped in a white shroud. Near the head, the white cloth bore dark, rust-colored stains, looking like dried blood. Taking another step forward, Lucas froze in absolute shock. The casket carriage before him was one of his own creations, the very model he had manufactured in the workshop just weeks ago. And there, glinting faintly under the moonlight on the handle, was his own engraved signature mark. He touched the engraving with a trembling hand, looked at the old man and whispered, "This is my carriage. I built this. How did you get it?" The old man offered no words, only a faint, sinister smile. Panic completely overtook Lucas. The tall figures around him began to silently close the circle, stepping closer from all sides. Without wasting another second, Lucas leaned down and yanked the shroud away from the face. His blood ran cold, and a paralyzing shiver locked his joints. The corpse laid out on the carriage had a deep, clean laceration across the throat, and the head was completely missing, with dark fluid still seeping from the wound. Lucas lost all capacity to think. His survival instinct kicked in with a single clear command: "Run!" He spun around and sprinted blindly into the dark. Behind him, a chorus of overlapping guttural screams tore through the night sky. Voices were shrieking, shattering the silence, shouting, "Come back! Finish the burial!" Lucas ran with every ounce of life left in him, crashing through the marsh, completely blind to his surroundings. Only when the faint, terrifying echoes of those screams finally faded into the distance did he slow down to a halt. His body was completely shattered from exhaustion. Suddenly, a massive silhouette loomed ahead of him in the middle of the marshland.
Startled at first, his eyes adjusted to realize it was a massive ancient oak tree standing isolated in the swamp. Remembering that this specific tree marked a central point in the swamp, he decided to shelter under it for the remaining hours of the night. His body could go no further. As he approached the tree, a faint familiar noise caught his ear, the same aggressive grunting of the wild boars he had encountered earlier. He crept forward cautiously. In the shadows of the massive roots, he spotted a white, human-shaped mass lying on the ground. The pack of pitch-black boars was huddled over it, their snouts buried deep in, devouring it frantically. The sound of Lucas's boots crunching on dry autumn leaves broke the silence. A few boars instantly snapped their heads up, staring directly at Lucas. In the moonlight, their dark snouts were glistening with a fresh, crimson stain dripping onto the earth. One by one, the entire pack raised their heads, locking their aggressive gaze onto Lucas.
His legs turned to stone. The boars unleashed a series of deep, enraged growls, stepping out from the shadows and closing in on him. Lucas felt that this was the absolute end of his life. He tried to force his body to run, but a sudden heat surged through his chest and his head began to spin violently. The world around him faded into pitch black. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was a couple of distant flashlight beams cutting through the dark toward him. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself lying on a cot inside a small, rustic wooden cabin. Two young men around his age were sitting beside him, and beams of bright morning sunlight were piercing through the gaps in the wooden walls. Seeing him stir, one of the young men spoke up. "We use this cabin to guard our crops out here in the swamp. We came out early before dawn to check on the irrigation, and we found you collapsed near the old oak tree. We honestly thought someone had committed a crime and dumped a body here, but when we checked, you were still breathing. So we carried you back inside. What happened to you? Who are you, and what were you doing out in the swamp at that hour?" Lucas shared his identity and recounted the terrifying events of the night. The two brothers listened intently and revealed that they had heard similar dark folklore about Cutthroat Swamp since childhood. While guarding the fields, they had experienced strange occurrences themselves, and though they hadn't seen the boars directly, they admitted to hearing those exact disturbing grunts outside the cabin on several nights. Lucas was burning with a severe fever. The brothers helped him back to his family home. Over the following weeks, his health deteriorated rapidly. His body became frail and he couldn't keep any food down. The fever would spike violently every time the sun went down. Desperate, his family sought the help of a local spiritual healer. After hearing the account, the healer provided blessed water and specific protective prayers, explaining that Lucas had crossed paths with a malevolent ancient entity in the swamp. The healer strictly warned that Lucas must not venture out alone after dark for at least 3 months. Following the advice, Lucas slowly recovered over the next few months. He eventually quit his job at the city workshop, returned to his hometown permanently, and opened a local hardware shop near the countryside market. Within 2 years, the memories of that horrific night had finally begun to fade. That was until a heavy monsoon season hit the region, flooding the lowlands and connecting the surrounding lakes. The waters were teeming with fish, turning the countryside into a massive festive fishing ground. One evening, sitting at his shop, Lucas's cousins convinced him to join him. "You can't just sit at the shop all day, Lucas. The swamp is full of massive catch. Let's go out tomorrow night. A rainy season without night fishing is a wasted life." The next night, a group of 6 friends gathered their gear and headed out into the flooded plains. The catch was extraordinary. They moved from one shallow lake to another, tracking the fish deep into the midnight hours. Along the way, they crossed paths with 2 other local fishermen carrying massive catches in their nets. Lucas's cousins asked them, "Hey man, where did you land such huge ones?" One of the fishermen replied, "Right out in the middle of Cutthroat Swamp. The water is deep, but the big ones are everywhere out there right now. "We're heading home because our nets are full." Excited by the news, the cousins insisted on heading toward the swamp. Since they were a large group of 6 men, Lucas pushed his past trauma aside and agreed. They stepped off the main path and waded into the knee-deep waters of Cutthroat Swamp, spreading out a few yards apart with their flashlights illuminating the clear water beneath them. Suddenly, the water directly in front of Lucas churned violently. He flashed his light and spotted a massive predatory pike moving beneath the surface. Thrilled by the sight, Lucas tried to trap it with his plunge net, but the fish darted forward. Determined to catch it, Lucas broke away from the group, pursuing the fish deeper into the waters. The fish would surface, splash its tail, and dive again, leading Lucas further away. Before he realized it, Lucas had traveled nearly 100 yards from his cousins. The giant fish finally came to a standstill. Lucas gripped his net tightly and plunged it down with all his might. But the net didn't hit the muddy bottom. It felt as though it dropped straight into a deep, hollow void. Losing his balance, Lucas tumbled headfirst into the freezing water, sinking into the hidden pit. As he fell, his submerged flashlight cast a sudden, terrifying beam of light under the water. He clearly saw that he had fallen into a perfectly carved, rectangular underwater trench, resembling a freshly dug grave. And at the bottom of that void, something long, white, and shrouded gleamed back at him. Instantly, water flooded the flashlight, and the light died out, plunging him into total darkness. In that exact fraction of a second, a cold, solid grip tightly clamped around his left wrist from beneath the dark water. Using every ounce of adrenaline, Lucas yanked his arm back violently, broke the surface of the water, and let out a blood-curdling scream. His cousins dropped their gear and rushed toward his voice through the water. One of them managed to grab Lucas's trembling hand just as he was about to sink again. Standing in the water, shivering uncontrollably with terror, Lucas recounted what had happened. Oddly enough, when the group searched the area with their heavy lights, they found absolutely no trace of any underwater trench or pit. The swamp floor was perfectly flat. They retrieved his floating net and submerged flashlight, called off the fishing trip immediately, and scrambled back to the main road. As they reached the safety of the gravel road, one of his cousins shined a light on Lucas to check on him. There, clamped tightly around Lucas's left wrist, were distinct, dark red finger marks bruised deep into his skin, as if a large hand had tried to drag him under. By the time he reached home, Lucas was burning with a violent fever once again. He never stepped into Cutthroat Swamp after dark ever again. That was the chilling conclusion to Lucas's encounter. Now, let us transition straight into a terrifying account shared by a man named Sam. I will present the events exactly as Sam described them.
I left my home country with grand dreams and landed straight in New York, Sam recalled. An old friend of mine lived there, and he owned a massive automotive repair and body shop in the city. Back home, we have a habit of leaning heavily on anyone we know when traveling abroad, and I did exactly that. I showed up at his workshop with all my luggage, flashed a big smile and said, "Look who's here. My food and accommodation are officially your responsibility now." My friend's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He stared at me in absolute disbelief. But given the circumstances, his hands were tied. I had entered the country on a tourist visa, and as you know, it is strictly illegal to seek employment on a tourist visa in the United States. However, off-the-books work under the table is a different story. Since I had a solid background in automobile mechanics and was quite handy with tools, my friend agreed to hire me as a helper in his workshop. Let's get to the core incident that took place on my very first day at the shop. Since I was new to New York, I didn't have a place of my own. My friend had a tiny apartment, but it was already packed with his wife and children, and I didn't want to intrude upon his family space. Understanding the situation, I told him, "Hey, don't worry about my accommodation. I'll just crash here at the workshop. There's plenty of space." The moment the words left my mouth, the other mechanics working in the shop froze. They stopped their work and traded uneasy glances. A palpable sense of fear washed over their faces. Watching them whisper among themselves, I thought, what is their problem? It's not like my staying here affects them in any way. My friend pulled me aside into a quiet corner and whispered anxiously, "Look, Sam, there's a serious issue here. You're talking about staying the night, but the locals and the staff swear this workshop is haunted. Multiple people have complained about unnatural demonic activities here at night. They say entities have claimed this space and no human can survive a night inside." I burst into loud laughter, nudging his shoulder. "Come on, man. You're living in modern America and you still believe in this superstitious nonsense. Forget about it. I'll be completely fine here. Let's see who tries to scare me." My confidence took everyone aback. My friend shrugged and said, "Look, it's your funeral. I've warned you about everything people say happens here. If you still want to stay, go ahead." As twilight faded into night, the workshop closed up. I stepped out to grab some dinner, wandered around the vibrant, neon-lit streets of New York for a while, and returned to the shop around 9 p.m. The workshop was massive, a sprawling open hall designed to fit dozens of vehicles under repair. Deep at the back was a small management office equipped with a comfortable leather sofa. I decided to set up camp on that couch for the night. Lying on the sofa, my mind drifted toward my uncertain future. My tourist visa was valid for only 6 months, after which I would have to figure out a permanent solution or return home. Amidst these heavy thoughts, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off to sleep. In the dead of night, a bizarre metallic noise abruptly woke me up. It sounded distinctly like someone was aggressively rummaging through the heavy iron tools and wrenches in the main hall. When you are startled out of a deep sleep, your brain takes a few seconds to process reality. I lay still on the couch, trying to read the situation. The room wasn't pitch black. It was shrouded in dim, shifting shadows. My immediate thought was that a burglar had broken into the shop. The noise was incredibly clear, the unmistakable clanking and rattling of a heavy metal toolbox being opened and tools being thrown around. I silently slipped off the sofa, moving on tiptoe toward the office door. The door was cracked open just a tiny fraction. Peering through the narrow gap, I scanned the entire main hall. To my absolute bewilderment, the workshop was completely empty. There was no one there. But the most terrifying part was that the exact second I reached the door, the loud, metallic clanking stopped instantly. Total silence. I stood there for a few minutes, convincing myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me in a strange, unfamiliar environment. Reassured, I walked back and lay down on the couch, but the peace didn't last long. A short while later, I was awoken by a different sound. This time, it sounded like someone was using the water dispenser just outside the office door. The clear, distinct sound of liquid pouring into a glass echoed through the silence. Someone was pouring and gulping down glass after glass of water. I lay on the sofa, helplessly counting the glasses. 1, 2, 3. The sound kept repeating. I resolved not to get up and check until the noise stopped. To be completely honest, investigating unexplained noises in a desolate, echoing workshop at midnight was a terrifying prospect. My friend's warning began to hammer against my skull. This place is claimed by entities. It felt as though whatever was out there was deliberately making its presence known to me. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel an overwhelming sense of panic. Perhaps a surge of sheer survival adrenaline kept me anchored. The workshop was located in an isolated commercial district far from residential areas. I turned over, closed my eyes, and tried to force myself back to sleep. I had barely closed my eyelids when I felt it. Someone walked directly behind my sofa. When someone passes closely by you in a tight space, you feel a distinct displacement of air, a slight breeze. In a completely sealed office room with absolutely no ventilation and or fans running, I felt a chilling gush of air brush right against my cheek as an invisible presence walked past me. That pushed me over the edge. My gathered courage evaporated in an instant, and I began to shiver uncontrollably. It was my very first night in the shop. I was entirely new to the country. I didn't know the emergency numbers, and I had no way to call for help. My friend had left me entirely isolated. I sat up abruptly on the couch, frantically reciting protective prayers under my breath. As I sat there huddled in fear, a loud voice suddenly echoed from the main hall. Someone was calling my name. Sam. Hey, Sam, come out here. My heart stopped. The voice was incredibly familiar. It sounded exactly like my friend. In the exact same tone and cadence, the voice kept repeating, Sam, come outside. Suddenly, a comforting thought struck me. What if the workshop crew is playing a massive prank on me? They knew I was staying the night. They probably set up this whole elaborate scare to mess with the new guy, and the ghost stories were just part of the setup. The moment this realization hit, my terror subsided into annoyance. I smiled to myself, thinking, I see what's going on. First the ghost noises, and now this. It's a common hazing ritual for new workers. I was completely certain my colleagues were hiding out there. Adopting a stern, unbothered tone, I shouted back, Hold on, I'm coming. With a triumphant smirk, I threw the office door open, but the sight that met my eyes in the main hall made my blood turn to ice. Across the workshop floor, hundreds of heavy iron tools, wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers and pliers were completely suspended in the air, plastered flat against the concrete walls as if held by a massive, invisible magnetic force. They were stuck to the walls in defiance of gravity. I froze, the words dying in my throat. Summoning every bit of breath, I stammered, Who's out there? Come out. I see what you're doing. Cut it out. The exact moment the words left my mouth, every single light in the workshop snapped off simultaneously. The entire facility was plunged into a thick, suffocating darkness. I stood there rooted, like a statue, paralyzed. I didn't have a flashlight, nor did I have matches or a lighter in my pockets. I didn't even have the courage to take a single step in the dark. Desperate, I began to blindly grope my way back toward the office door, planning to trace the wall, slip inside, and lock the door behind me. I moved with extreme caution, extending my hands forward to avoid crashing into any heavy machinery. I reached out to find a solid brick wall. but my fingers didn't hit a cold concrete structure. Instead, my hand landed on something soft, warm, and distinctly contoured. A human shoulder. In that pitch-black room, I clearly felt my hand resting on the bare shoulder of a living person. A jolt of pure electricity ran through my spine. Beneath my fingers was the unmistakable texture of muscle and bone. In a blind panic, I gripped the shoulder tightly, shaking it violently, and screamed, "Who is this? Who are you?" There was no response, only a terrifying, dead silence. I screamed louder, calling out my friend's name. "Stop it! If this is a joke, end it right now. That's enough." I was screaming like a maniac, but the form beneath my hand didn't flinch, didn't speak, and strangely, I couldn't hear any sound of breathing coming from it. Suddenly, the overhead lights flashed back on with a blinding surge. As my eyes adjusted to the sudden brightness, I gasped. There was absolutely no one standing in front of me. The space I was tightly gripping was completely empty air. But as my gaze dropped to the floor, I spotted it, a distinct, solid black shadow, detached from any physical body, rapidly darting away from my feet, sliding across the floor and vanishing straight into the wall. That was the absolute breaking point. I couldn't stay inside for another fraction of a second. I bolted toward the main exit, hoisted the heavy metal shutter up with manic strength, and threw myself out onto the street. Right outside the shop was a wooden workbench. I collapsed onto it, my body violently trembling. I refused to step back inside. I curled up on that bench in the freezing night air, eventually passing out from sheer mental exhaustion. The next morning, around 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock a.m., the other employees began arriving for the day shift. They were shocked to find me fast asleep on the outdoor bench. They shook me awake, asking, "Hey, Sam, what's going on? Why are you sleeping out here? Didn't you sleep inside?" I remained silent, refusing to utter a word. A short while later, my friend arrived. The moment I saw him, I grabbed his arm without a word and dragged him straight into the private office. I recounted every horrific detail of the night: the floating tools, the pouring water, the voice calling my name, and the solid shoulder in the dark. But the most baffling part was that when we walked out into the main hall, every single heavy tool was neatly back in its proper rack, as if nothing had ever disturbed them. I looked at my friend and said, "There is something seriously wrong with this place. I thought it was a prank, but what I witnessed last night was not the work of any human being." My friend's face turned grim. "What do you want to do now? What's your plan?" I threw my hands up helplessly. "I don't know. It's only my second day in the country and my pockets are completely empty. I don't have the money to rent a room anywhere else. Where am I supposed to go?" My friend reassured me. "Don't worry about the money. I can advance your salary. But finding an apartment in this city takes at least 3 to 4 days. Where will you stay until then?" We both fell into a deep silence. I muttered quietly, "Can you just let me crash at your place for a couple of days?" He looked down, filled with guilt. "Believe me, Sam, I would. But my place is a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. One room is for the kids, and the other is for my wife and me. There isn't an inch of spare space. Did you mention last night's events to anyone else?" I shook my head. "No, I waited for you. I didn't want your business reputation ruined." He sighed with relief. Good. Let's do this. Tonight, I'll assign one of the newer workers to stay here with you. You probably panicked because you were entirely alone. With 2 people, you'll be fine. I snapped at him angrily. Are you out of your mind? After what I saw with my own eyes, you expect me to sleep in there again? Absolutely not. My friend grew irritated. Look, Sam, I don't have any other options for you. You can sleep on the streets for all I care. The best I can do is provide a companion. Beyond that, my hands are tied. I dug my heels in. Fine. I'll sleep on the outdoor bench again tonight. I'm not stepping foot inside after dark. My friend raised his voice, reprimanding me. Sam, are you trying to ruin yourself and drag me down with you? You are here on a tourist visa. If the NYPD spots a foreigner sleeping on a commercial workbench at midnight, they will detain you. They will launch an investigation. What will you tell them? They will deport you back home immediately, and my business license will be permanently revoked. The threat of deportation terrified me. I had sacrificed so much to reach America. I couldn't risk being sent back. Defeated, I gave in. Fine, but you must make sure someone stays with me. I need someone else there. We buried ourselves in work throughout the day, but as twilight approached, a heavy knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. At 6 p.m., the shop began closing up. My friend called over a newly hired worker, a young immigrant named Ali, who had recently arrived from Pakistan. Ali was a quiet, incredibly mild-mannered guy. My friend told him, Ali, you need to stay back tonight and keep Sam company at the shop. Ali's face turned pale. Sir, why me? Why do I have to stay? My friend hid the terrifying truth, spinning a lie instead. We have a VIP client arriving around 3 a.m. to pick up an urgent vehicle delivery. You need to be here to hand over the keys and handle the paperwork. Terrified of the building's reputation, Ali pleaded, Sir, please let me go home. I'll commute back here exactly at 3 a.m. to deliver the vehicle. My friend cut him off sharply. Don't argue with me. When I say stay, you stay. The client might show up early. That's an order. Left with no choice, the poor guy agreed. The office had 2 matching sofas. I took one, and Ali settled on the other. We talked, swapped stories, and tried to force laughter to lighten the heavy atmosphere. But truth be told, we were both completely terrified. Ali had also heard the dark rumors surrounding the workshop. By 11 p.m., exhaustion caught up to us. Ali was struggling to stay awake, terrified of missing the fictitious client. I reassured him, Go ahead and sleep, man. I'm wide awake. I'll handle the delivery if anyone shows up. Relieved, he drifted off. Soon after, my own eyes grew heavy. Before closing my eyes, I offered a silent prayer, begging that the night would pass without incident and that no midnight anomalies would wake us. But as the elders say, when misfortune is written in your destiny, even the smallest hopes crumble. That is exactly what happened. Deep into the night, I was violently shaken awake. Someone was screaming frantically, grabbing my shoulders. Sam, wake up. Wake up right now. Something is terribly wrong. I snapped out of my deep slumber. Ali was hovering over me, practically in tears, whispering in a trembling voice, Listen to the hall. What is that noise? As my brain registered reality, a freezing dread gripped me. From the main hall, a loud, chaotic din broke the silence, far more violent than the previous night. It was the frantic, heavy crashing and clanking of iron tools being hurled around. I tried to put on a brave face to calm him down, even though my own throat was completely dry. "Hey, it's fine. It's probably just a family of large raccoons or rats knocking over the metal storage bins." Ali cried out, "No way, that's an animal, Sam. Come on, we have to look." I checked the office wall clock. It was 2:30 a.m. Summoning every ounce of collective courage, we opened the office door and stepped out into the sprawling main hall. The moment our feet hit the concrete floor, an incredibly foul, suffocating stench hit our nostrils. It smelled intensely of burnt flesh, a rancid, putrid odor hanging thick in the air. The smell was so overwhelming, it made me gag. Suddenly, Ali let out a terrified shriek. "Sam, look over there. Who is that standing in the corner?" He was pointing a shaking finger toward a pitch-black, unlit corner of the massive facility. I strained my eyes, staring into the darkness, trying desperately to lock onto a shape, but I couldn't see anything. "Where, Ali? There's nothing there. It's just shadows. Your mind is playing tricks on you." Ali was now trembling violently, slipping into a state of sheer hysteria. He whispered, "Look closer, Sam. Look right into the dark. There's a woman standing there, staring right at us." I kept my gaze fixed on that exact dark corner, desperately trying to see what he was seeing. In that exact fraction of a second, Ali let out a blood-curdling scream. "Sam, duck, move!" He threw his weight into me, shoving me violently to the side. The exact moment I stumbled over, a sharp, rushing gush of wind sliced right past my ear. I will never forget that split second for the rest of my life. It was a matter of millimeters. A massive, heavy iron sledgehammer flew out of the darkness, missing my temple by a fraction of an inch, and slammed violently into the solid brick wall behind us with a deafening crack. The iron hammer embedded itself deep into the masonry. This wasn't a mere prank or a scare tactic anymore. It was a lethal warning. Whatever was in that room was no longer trying to terrify us. It was trying to kill us. We didn't need to say another word. Panting for our lives, we turned around and bolted toward the exit. We threw the metal shutter open, scrambled out into the street, and slammed it shut behind us. Standing on the deserted New York sidewalk, our clothes were completely drenched in sweat, our chests heaving. I gasped out, "Lock it! Lock the shutter right now. Forget the shop. We're leaving. I'm coming to your place tonight." Ali's hands were shaking so much he could barely align the padlock. "But Sam, what about the client? The vehicle delivery at 3 a.m. I yelled at him. "To hell with the client. If we stay here, we won't be alive to deliver anything. Lock it." He snapped the lock shut, and we practically ran through the city streets toward his apartment. Fortunately, he rented a tiny single-room studio just a few blocks away. The moment we crossed his threshold, we locked the door with multiple deadbolts and collapsed flat onto the floor, gasping for air. Once we settled down, I confessed the entire truth to him, that there was never any client expected that night. Ali looked at me, sighing with exhaustion. "Man, if you were in such a desperate situation for a place to stay, you should have just told me. We could have shared this studio from day one." Neither of us slept a single wink for the rest of that night. The terrifying image of that flying hammer kept flashing before our eyes. From that night onward, I permanently moved into Ali's studio, sharing the rent. It has been nearly 18 years since that horrific encounter. Today, I'm a proud US citizen, and I own my own independent automotive repair franchise in the city. By the grace of the Almighty, I am doing incredibly well. But my old friend, he still operates that exact same cursed workshop. To this day, the facility functions perfectly normal during the day shift. But the moment the sun slips below the horizon, no force on earth can convince a single human being to remain inside that facility. The moment night falls, the workshop returns entirely to the entities that claim it. Sometimes, when I'm sitting alone in my office late at night, the memories of that encounter surface and a cold shiver runs down my spine. I still haven't found an answer to the ultimate mystery of that night. Whose physical shoulder did I grip in the dark? And perhaps it is an answer I am never meant to find.